5 years ago, I was a completely different Sunny, and sort of preparing for today, I was just looking back at photos, and even when I look back at photos from Sunny, who she was 5 years ago, I was a completely different person. So I looked different, felt different, and the Sunny that sort of stepped into the studio 5 years ago was low in confidence. When I stepped onto those scales and looked at my figures, almost half of me was body fat.
Okay.
So although I'd lost weight, my body fat percentage was significantly high. It was 43%,
Right.
which is way above normal.
Yeah.
Then when I started training at the gym, I realised that I couldn't keep up with people that were sort of 10, 15 years older than me.
Okay.
So that's when I realised that I wasn't as fit as I was. The portions are different, so I'm eating smaller portion sizes,
Right.
so that's the first thing. Secondly, I'm eating a more balanced meal, so I'm eating a lot more veg. And I make sure, and one way to do it, so top tip is make sure your plate is colourful.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think probably 5 years ago I was eating a lot of beige food, and beige tends to be high in carbohydrate and processed.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of colour on my plate, and that means a lot of fresh fruit and veg essentially.
Welcome to Real People, Real Results, Real Change, the podcast that's dedicated to helping real people develop real health and fitness in their lives. Real people like you, business owners, professionals, house husbands and housewives, and students. I'm Stefan, I'm a personal wellness coach at UFit Studio, and I'll be your host. This episode I'm talking with Dr Sunny Jutla, an emergency frontline medic for over 10 years. Sunny is a proud part-time soccer mum and is passionate about optimising fitness, nutrition and mindset for herself and for others. In this episode, we discuss the role health and fitness has played in her life in the last few years. Okay, Sunny, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited about this discussion, and particularly because you've been on a long journey, right? But let's start with where you are now, right? What's things like for you, like right here, right now, in terms of your health, your lifestyle, your fitness, your nutrition, all of that sort of thing. Like what's fallen into place for you?
That's great. So firstly, thanks for having me, Stefan. I feel grateful to be here right now. So I think if I was to describe where I am right now, I am feeling positive and comfortable in my own shell. So what does that mean for me as a person? So fitness-wise, I'm probably in the fittest shape I have been for many, many years.
Okay.
Feeling balanced in terms of my mindset, and I'm really looking forward to what the future brings, which is completely different slant to where I was sort of 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So in fact, I've just come from the gym, so I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good today.
Excellent. Yeah, you got your smoothie with you.
I've got my smoothie. I'm in gym kit.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. Yeah, because you've been on a journey, right? And things weren't always where they are now. And 5 years ago, particularly, there was sort of some turning points and stuff in your life. So, I don't know. Do you want to rewind for me a little bit and talk me through some of what you've achieved and what that's been like?
Yeah, sure, can do. So 5 years ago, I was a completely different Sunny, and sort of preparing for today, I was just looking back at photos, and even when I look back at photos from Sunny, who she was 5 years ago, I was a completely different person. So I looked different, felt different, and the Sunny that sort of stepped into the studio 5 years ago was low in confidence, and she didn't know how to put herself first.
Okay.
And I think when people used to say put yourself first, I thought it was a sort of selfish way of looking at things, but I realised that actually it's fundamental to being a strong person and sort of moving forward in terms of your life and your goals. I was really unfit, and I thought I wasn't until I started training, and I had very little knowledge in terms of nutrition. So from that point of view, I wasn't doing very well. And in terms of the ripple effect on the rest of my life, I was having relationship problems, and although I thought I was performing well at work, I probably wasn't. And since then, I've actually achieved a lot. So I was a completely different person 5 years ago.
Right. It's so interesting what you say, actually, that you thought you were fit, but you weren't. A few people sort of have said this to me. So what was that for you?
Yeah, so, and we will be touching on this, but after having my son Dylan, I put on a lot of weight for various reasons, which we can talk about. And prior to joining the studio, I had joined a local gym, and I'd lost probably about 8 to 10 kilos. So in my mind, I thought, wow, I've lost a significant amount of weight. I'm training. Then I joined the studio and I stepped onto the scales there, and we call it in-body, so it gives you a body analysis. And when I stepped onto those scales and looked at my figures, almost half of me was body fat.
Okay.
So although I'd lost weight, my body fat percentage was significantly high. It was 43%.
Right.
Which is way above normal.
Yeah.
Then when I started training at the gym, I realised that I couldn't keep up with people that were sort of 10, 15 years older than me.
Okay.
So that's when I realised that I wasn't as fit as I was. Now I can surpass all these people that that I was struggling to keep up with 15 years ago. So definitely my journey over the past 5 years has been beneficial.
Yeah. Okay. And so what was your general sort of lifestyle and food and things? So what was different back then? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, so the first time I met with Sam for an initial consultation, he said to me, can you list out to me what you've had over the past 24 hours in terms of food? And when I listed it out, I realised that I didn't have any vegetables in my diet.
Okay.
And a lot of it was processed food. And although I thought I was eating smaller portions, which I probably was, I was eating a combination of the wrong things.
Okay.
So in terms of sort of portioning out your food in terms of protein, fats, veg, carbohydrates, I had no idea of how to do that back then. So my diet was different, for sure. And doing my shift work, I didn't know how to balance my diet with my shift work. So 5 years ago, I didn't know how that worked at all.
Okay. Well, we'll come on to that, right? So, okay. And then, so you've got a coach, you're showing up at the gym. What's starting to change then? What are you starting to learn, or I'm guessing you're starting to change up habits of some, different kinds and things like tell me a little bit about that. Like what started to change, and I guess it wasn't a single thing, right? It was a journey, and there were phases to that, I would imagine.
Definitely. So when I first joined YouFit, I was part of a challenge. So I was working alongside other members, and so I did a 6 weeks challenge.
Okay.
And that was quite a rigid format. So I had sort of accountability meetings with the other members, and regular check-ins. So it was a different way of working towards my sort of weight goal at the time.
Yeah.
Since then, I've had a significant drop in weight. So I did really, really well during the pandemic. So that phase was slightly different. That was more driven by myself in terms of wanting to be physiologically fit during a pandemic, because I was working frontline. So I was worried about becoming ill.
Right, of course. Yep.
So that was different. So it wasn't so much weight loss back then. It was about putting myself in the best physiological position to be working frontline. And luckily, I didn't sort of fall ill with COVID at the time. Then after that, it's interesting because up until I'd say about a month ago, I reached sort of a plateau phase, / putting on a little bit of weight. And now moving forward, I've got goals which are different, more to do with my life moving forward. And I'm going to be supported by my mentor who's been with me since the beginning of the journey. So in summary, the journey is never linear. It has ups and downs. And actually, what's really important about my journey is that I'm constantly moving the goalposts, and it all depends on life events, which is why YouFit is a core part of my life.
Okay, cool. So tell me about some of the highs and lows, actually. That's kind of along the way there, over those sort of 5 years.
Yeah. So let's start with the positive.
Okay, sounds good.
So the highs. So I reached my lowest body weight and body fat percentage during the pandemic. And that
Well
was
done.
so
Wow.
thank you. And it took a lot of hard work, but so Helen's my mentor, who I also call my guru, because she literally is. She's my teacher.
She's your coach, right?
She's my coach, yeah. So she's my coach. So she's been my coach since I started UFIT. Okay. And the massive win there, rather than just looking at numbers, was the fact that I carried on putting health and fitness at the forefront despite the gym being closed. Mm-hmm. So the studio was closed. Mm-hmm. I had no weights at home. I had no fitness equipment, and I literally achieved that through balanced nutrition, and I had one fitness mat and a good pair of trainers.
Okay.
And that got me through the pandemic. So I used to log in and do a lot of the online classes, and I had regular sort of virtual accountability meetings with my coach, which kept me on track. The pandemic was a real scary time. I saw some really poorly patients as part of my work, and I knew I was up against it. So a massive win for me was being mentally strong through a difficult time. So that was a huge high. One of my lows would probably be towards the beginning of my fitness journey, and that was when personal circumstances essentially led to my marriage breakdown. Okay. And at that time, I pulled back slightly from the gym. I couldn't go as much as I wanted to go because I was going through a really difficult time. Yeah. However, when I did come back to the studio, and even when I wasn't there, the coaches were really supportive, and they got me back on track again. And that's when I realised how mentally strong I was, and they gave me the courage and the strength to push forward. Right. So that was a low in terms of the circumstances, but the positive impact was huge, and I'm so much better off for it now.
Yeah. Okay, so you're physically stronger, mentally stronger. So what are some of the ways that you've done this? So you've made lots of changes in your life to achieve this, right? How have you done that? Because you're a busy professional, okay, working in high pressure work, frontline NHS, working shifts as well. How do you do this? Like what have you done? How have you achieved this?
So I think the fundamental principle for me underlying all of this is putting myself first. So everything that you've described, when I'm so busy, back 5 years ago, I used to put myself at the bottom of the pecking order. Now I try to put myself right at the top. Sometimes I'm number one, sometimes I'm number two, but I need to be at the top. If I'm at the top, it means I can sort of maintain control of the situation. And the way I've done this is essentially being really organised. So that can sometimes mean having a weekly planner. So I sometimes have a piece of paper and I jot out when I'm going to train, what I'm going to eat, and my shifts. Other times when it's really stressful, though, I don't have the mental capacity to do that. Yeah. So the way I've managed to achieve it is people like Bav. So Bav works at the UFIT studio, and she's essentially head of house. She makes sure that I'm booked in for my sessions. If I've got booked in sessions, I'm accountable. So that means that I go to the gym. If I go to the gym, it has a ripple effect on my food, and I'm a bit more organised. So it's the first two ways I've done it. The third way I've done it is during the pandemic, especially, I did lots and lots of gratitude journaling. And if you look on my shelf in my study, I've actually got probably 5 journals. So I'm a typical A&E doctor who has a very, very short attention span. So,
Is that right?
So yeah, definitely. So I'll start off with the journal and I'll be like, I really, really like this. And then I'll go and buy another one. Then I'll flip back to the old one because I need it to look different.
Okay.
So daily I do gratitude, and what that looks like is setting myself up for the day. So in the morning, sometimes I choose a word for the day, and that puts me in a good mindset. And if I'm feeling good and I'm thinking positively, I'll do positive things for myself.
Yeah.
The other way I do it is now every night, without fail, I do gratitude journaling with my partner. So we tell each other what we're grateful for, and that has a positive effect on the following day and also at that time.
That's incredible.
So yes, that's another way I do it. And not to forget my son. So Dylan's amazing. He will always say to me, "Mummy, have you done your exercise today?" Or if I'm feeling not wanting to train, I'll say, "Dylan, what do you think I should do?" And he'll be like, "Mummy, you need to do your exercise." So all these factors have meant that I can balance it with busy work.
Okay, amazing. And yeah, so it sounds like it's interesting you say, like you have to keep it fresh.
You have
like
to
mixing
keep it
it
fresh.
up. Like, and I know that's not, for some people, it's about, it's more about like the familiarity, and it is about that very high level of consistency. And actually, when things get switched up or something like that, when there's changes, that there's more of a barrier, right, than an incentive. But it sounds like for you that it's really important to keep things mixed up, keep things fresh, keep almost reinventing stuff a little bit, so to sort of keep that engagement for you.
Yeah, definitely. So I am, and it's important we talk about this actually, because so I'd say that over the past 6 to 9 months, I have struggled slightly to push my fitness goals. So I've reached what you call a plateau phase or a holding phase.
Yep.
And I've spoken a lot about it with my coach, and the strategies I applied in the pandemic no longer apply right now.
Okay.
And it was important that I realised that. And it was all about keeping it fresh. So my lifestyle has changed. And now all the cafes, restaurants, bars are open.
Right.
I'm in an extremely happy relationship, which also impacts on your lifestyle. Dylan's older. So I needed to mix things up a bit, and I finally realised how to do that. But keeping it fresh is really, really important, because you need to keep your mind engaged.
Yeah.
And once your mindset is correct, everything else follows.
Right. Yeah.
So I think I think keeping it fresh is very, very important.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Food. How does this kind of, what part does this play, and what's this like for you?
Food is a massive, massive factor. So for those of you who are watching or listening, you must put food at the top. So I focused a lot on sort of exercise part of things, and that's because for me, it keeps me in a positive mindset. However, food is fundamental. Food, I'd say, is 75 to 80% of the battle.
Right.
It's actually really difficult, I think, in the UK to maintain a healthy food regime.
Why specifically in the UK? That's interesting.
Yeah, so I've noticed when I go on holiday, it's much easier to get hold of fresh food, more choices. And so recently I went to Dubai, and I did not put on any weight. I came back actually probably a slightly lower weight.
Right.
I ate well, but there was lots of fresh food available for me to pick from. And I was really mindful about my eating. And part of that was I was on holiday, I was relaxed, right? But there were more options. Here I have to actively seek healthier food options. When I go to the supermarket, I have to be really, really careful about what food I pick.
Yeah.
And it's more expensive, I've noticed. So if you look at your processed foods, they tend to be cheaper.
Right.
Tend to be on certain deals.
Yeah.
Fresher food's difficult.
Yeah.
And it doesn't last as long. So there's part of that. Also, if you want to be at your optimum health level, you need to plan. And it's taking that time out to plan your food.
Yeah.
So whether that be what you're going to cook for the week or what you're going to buy, it takes some thinking behind it. So that's what makes it difficult. I mean, I always wished I had a chef at home. It'd make it so much easier, right? But yeah, food is important.
Yeah. And what do you notice? What are you eating differently, or are you eating differently, or is it to do with, I don't know, portion sizes or like the combinations of I don't know, like carbohydrates, protein, stuff like that? What's different to how you used to eat?
How you used to eat. So the portions are different. So I'm eating smaller portion sizes.
Right.
So that's the first thing. Secondly, I'm eating a more balanced meal. So I'm eating a lot more veg. And I make sure, and one way to do it, so top tip is make sure your plate is colourful.
Okay, yeah.
So I think probably 5 years ago I was eating a lot of beige food, and beige tends to be high in carbohydrate and processed.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of colour on my plate, and that means a lot of fresh fruit and veg, essentially.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and especially the past few weeks, I've really cut down on treats. So I've got a sweet tooth, so I love desserts and things, and the only sort of dessert I had was for my birthday,
Right.
which was a very small portion of cake, whereas probably 5 years ago I'd be eating a lot more sweet stuff.
Yeah.
So portions have changed, how I mix the plate up has changed, and my treats have changed.
Okay, cool. Okay. Okay, this is fantastic. So obviously we're going to talk again, right? But what would you... Just kind of looking back at the last 5 years, like if you had to pull like the top sort of, top few sort of tips or things that that you've learned from it, and other people can perhaps sort of benefit from that. What are some of the sort of the headlines? Yeah.
So learn to put yourself first. Consistency is key.
Right.
And to be consistent, don't be scared about changing things up, keeping them fresh, like we said earlier. Trust the process. So it can take some time to achieve results. And it's important that you don't lose focus whilst trying to get those results, because there are some ups and downs in the journey, and the way to keep yourself motivated is to take lots of pictures. Okay, to have a visual reminder, because the numbers don't always tell the story. So if I was to show you a picture of me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and now, I'm a completely different person.
Right.
I was lighter 2 years ago, but I probably look better now.
Yeah.
So visual reminders is really important. And also, don't be scared to try new things and push yourself out your comfort zone, because I genuinely believe that the growth really occurs when you do push yourself out your comfort zone.
Okay.
So yeah, they're the top ones.
Yeah, okay, absolutely fantastic. All right, thank you so much, Sunny, and I look forward to talking to you next time.
Thank you so much.